Hey, everybody, it's Liz joining you as usual from Central Virginia on the unceded lands of the Monacan Nation. And I am so happy that you're here with me today. And if you're a regular listener, bear with me because you know it's coming. I got to give a little quick plug here for my book, Home to Her, from the amazing team at Womancraft Publishing. It's available wherever you buy your books. This book is basically what I wished I'd had when I started learning about the sacred feminine. It includes a lot of historical evidence that I spent years researching, and it also includes a lot of my personal experiences as I began to understand who she is and why she is so relevant to our lives today. And there's also a lot of insights from my guests on the show that are in it too. So please, if it calls to you, check it out. And if you think you do want to buy it, I would encourage you to consider purchasing it directly from Womancraft, which is a really great woman-owned and run business, or order it from your local bookstore. And if you've read it and you enjoyed it, I would love to receive your favorable reviews. Reviews on Amazon and Goodreads in particularly are really helpful. And same goes for this podcast. If you like it and it would be in your joy, please consider taking a moment and rating it or leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcast. And in particular, reviews on Apple Podcasts are super helpful. If you do happen to do that, I'm so grateful. And I'll put all this in the show notes as a reminder, and let's get on with our show now, shall we? All right. So I've been following the work of my guest today for a while. Longtime listeners might remember one of my earlier episodes back in 2020 with Jyoti Ma, who is a founder of the Center for Sacred Studies, and she's also one of the conveners of the Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. And that episode, I'll put it in the show notes because I've gone back and listened to it a few times since. There's just a lot of wisdom there. But one of the initiatives that Jyoti is involved with is called the Mother Earth Delegation of United Indigenous Nations, which brings together Indigenous leaders from around the world to protect sacred lands and champion Indigenous rights. These gatherings are available for you to join, and you can also watch them online afterwards. They're pretty special. So I'll put that in the show notes too. But my guest today is a member of that group. And so that's kind of how I found out about her work and her presence in the world. And I didn't tell her this, but she's kind of been on my podcast guest wish list for a while. I still have this, I actually have a really long list of podcast guests that I hope will come on. And it doesn't matter how long I've done this. I still kind of have this fangirl thing where I'm like, I don't know if I should reach out to people. So I'll wait until I'm feeling courageous and then I'll start reaching out to new guests. But anyways, as luck would have it, someone had read my book and happened to be my guest student. And so she reached out to me and offered to introduce us. And when things like this happen, that is always an automatic yes for me. So, and here we are. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her and her work in the world, and she's doing a lot. So we'll have to see what we can cover. But let me go ahead and introduce her to you now. Shona Blue Star Newcomb of Shawnee, Lenape, and Zapotec lineage has been opening hearts and minds across the world as an international speaker, visionary leader, intuitive healer, medium, spiritual guide, and mentor for change makers. She is a delegate with the Mother Earth Delegation and has been a featured speaker at universities, global conferences, festivals, podcast, radio, and online summits. In her dedication to personal and planetary healing, she helps to lead a global movement with her father for conscious change, speaking out on the domination code, which we will talk about. Shona offers a fresh perspective and approach to social and conscious change with her unique teachings on the Reverence Code, which we will also talk about. She has created 2 life-changing leadership courses, the Reverence Code Changemakers Course and Sacred Feminine Rising Healing Immersion. She holds a vision of the beauty of the new era of love with great healing and much-needed reunion of the sacred feminine and sacred masculine in unity and harmony. Shona is dedicated to healing for the earth, humanity, future generations, and all beings in this time of the great shift and a return to what she calls the time that was before. Shona, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's very delightful to be here. I'm thrilled, and thanks for reaching out. It's really wonderful to connect.
And thank you for saying yes. It is funny. I do still get a little nervous about that. I'm like, gosh, I've been doing this show for like 4 years. I shouldn't get nervous about reaching out to people to have them on the show, but I still do. So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'd love to start with people usually just hearing a little bit about your spiritual background. And those of you who've been listening for a while know that the reason I like to ask this question, well, one, I'm just curious. I like to hear what that's like for people. And then I'm also curious about what was helpful for you, what's carried through, and how and if that kind of opened the door to some understanding of the divine feminine. So we can go there after that. But, initially, I'd love to just hear about your spiritual background.
Sure. I feel like my spiritual background started extremely early, like as far as just coming to a place of really feeling connection with spirit. And I feel like even connecting with, I mean, I didn't necessarily call it divine feminine, sacred feminine, but I definitely had a sense of, I guess I would say like presence or spirit or this life force connection. I think that's what really brings to heart. It brings it to heart with what I consider the sacred feminine now in the work that I do. Very much connection with nature, but of course, being from Indigenous lineage and background, I was immersed in ceremony since I was a baby, just going with my parents and community. So I had a lot of really amazing elders early on. I had a lot of intuitive experiences, mystical kind of experiences, people would say early on. And it was kind of scary for me as a kid in some ways. So I didn't have, complete like guidance as I would have liked to if things had been in the time that was before, where we had, community and elders that really were living completely in that immersion of spirit and culture as it was intact. So many of our, Indigenous communities have lost touch because of colonization and the effects in that way. So we can speak a little bit more about that. But definitely, I felt, a deep spiritual connection since I was a very young child. I didn't actually attend church in the way of religion and that type of thing, but nature, has been my temple, has been my sacred connection. The trees, I had so many tree houses, even as a little kid. So very much, I feel like my connection with my intuition and just feeling spirit around me, like the life force energy all around me, has been very much a big part of my life for forever, as long as I can remember. And also just having really amazing women surrounding me. I had, my mom and my adopted aunties and grandmas from the community, multicultural community, but Indigenous elders, as I mentioned. So I feel like that really held me in this beautiful way of growing up. So I wasn't without challenges, of course, but I feel like that gave me a different perspective than a lot of people have today.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Do you feel like those intuitive experiences that you had as a child, were those, if you had a really close-knit community, were those held and met like with your family members? Were they able to?
That's the thing, is actually on that level, like it's hard to explain on that side. On the intuitive level, I feel like I had mediumship abilities and dreams and experiences. And on that level, it was not something that I really knew who to talk to or how to be with. And that's what I said. If we had medicine people that were, in our communities, like as it had been in the time that was before, I think that could have been something that would have been, like you said, mentored to me, helped me in that way. But in my community, we had a deep spiritual connection. We had sacred, we went to Sundance, or we went to different ceremonies. We went to pipe ceremonies. So that was introduced to me early on. But as far as, kind of in that way of exploring deeper into those gifts, that didn't come until a little bit later. I had to work my way into that and actually find the courage, I think. So that's something that many women, regardless of our backgrounds today, that's something that we're all coming back to. And it's so much needed in these times.
Oh, yeah. So true. Well, and yeah, I guess we can get into this. I want to go ahead and ask this now, though. As that opened up for you, like that understanding of your intuitive gifts and the value and the wisdom inherent in your intuition, do you feel like that went hand in hand with your understanding of divine feminine? Do those things feel connected to you, or what was that awakening like for you?
Yeah, I really do feel like the more that I connected in with my intuitive, gifts and understanding and really this like opening, I feel like I would open and then I would close and open and close. And so maybe other women can relate to this, or even, feeling into what my purpose is and living a more spirit-led life. that, of course, can sometimes be, there can be catalysts that bring that to fruition for us. And so I've had some of those kind of falling off or leaping off the cliff and like learning to fly kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some of those moments of greater awakenings. I always called them my spiritual upgrades. Because
like
it's
that.
like, oh, I'm going through another one of these. And each time I learned so much through these growth spurts that are so important. And we're all going through that right now in this time of the great shift. But I feel like that has been something that I really leaned into more, probably like in my 20s. And actually in 2011, this is what was hard for me to talk about for the longest time, was I started having these really transmissions, or some people call channeled messages, spiritual messages. I feel like, how do songs arrive for people? In similar ways, they started to arrive for me in this way. But I do remember one experience that was so profound. And some people say, well, were you, in this deep meditation, or were you like in some kind of spiritual practice? And I actually was vacuuming, which is really hilarious to me. So it wasn't like I wasn't asking for it, but I literally had almost like this visceral experience, and I had this sense of needing to write, to be like a scribe. And I literally had this booming female voice, is the only thing I could describe it as. Kind of, I just felt like Gaia, divine feminine mother, was speaking to me. And so I got one of my first very big, profound messages about the great shift at that time. So that was in 2011.
Wow.
And it really, it shook me, literally, physically, it shook me. I felt very small, but I also felt like, I know I'm supposed to do something with this, but who am I? We all go through these. And so I didn't actually share that message. I wrote it down because I am very clairaudient. I have a lot of these different gifts, but I wrote it down, and then I felt like, who can I even talk to about this? And interestingly, my dad is the one person that has been very much encouraging me, supporting me, and just saying, yes, let's celebrate this. This is amazing to, this is something that I see now. So many people have been experiencing messages, so many people, especially Indigenous elders throughout the world, but just common people, we're experiencing these messages. But I feel like it's these guideposts that are coming through for us to really follow the evolutionary leap that we're in right now. And there's a lot of support around us in the unseen realms, just as much as the seen realms, when we kind of come together in community for this connection.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that you named it. This experience happened to you while you were vacuuming. No, it's funny, but it's important, right? Because I do think there can be this assumption that you do need to be in this deep state of meditation, or that we need to remove ourselves from the world in some way in order to have a meaningful connection with spirit, and whatever word you want to use for that, divine feminine or God, goddess. But it doesn't really seem to be the case. That's not right. I mean, if she, source, can show up to you while you're vacuuming, then I don't know. And I feel like there's a message in that too, right? Like that, I don't know. I would love to hear you speak to that, but it doesn't seem like now is the time for us to necessarily be removing ourselves to caves so that we can sit solo and communion with source.
I agree. I think that very much it's about us learning to be in the balance of things, and that we are moving in this time, in this world. And even in messages that I've gotten since then, it is very much about learning to understand that we are, divine beings. We are here in a human experience in this moment. And so it is learning to kind of walk in both worlds, have one foot in each world. And I see very much, we're mothers, we're daughters, we're sisters, we're wives, we're whatever we are, all of the different positions. We're doing work in the world. We're very busy. We're multitasking, especially today's women. So I feel like that's another part of it, is it doesn't mean that we can't be in our lives and not be spiritual, or vice versa. I feel like we can really be in both. It is about having practices, and that's what I work with my students, and I offer courses and classes to help people understand about the deeper history of how we've found ourselves in the place where we are today, and all of the imbalances that we're experiencing currently, but also a way forward. And really, I feel the spirit-led life and that connection with source, or divine feminine mother, like all of these experiences are very important for, I feel like we're returning to that time that was before. And I feel like science is catching up to what our ancient and indigenous peoples have known for millennia in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally. Well, I'd love to hear you describe. Okay, so it was clearly a woman's voice. So tell me, what does this language, the sacred feminine, mean to you? Is that language that you want to use? That's language that you use, right? So I
I do
always want to
use that.
give people a chance to use different language, but like, what does that mean to you when we say that language, sacred feminine?
Well, I feel like it's coming to ourselves and really understanding this deeper, that we are, like I just mentioned, we are these divine beings. We are connected with all things. We are interconnected. So many of the teachings that I feel like, have come from my indigenous communities growing up, I feel like that has been intact for me in terms of just having that understanding, the spirit in all things, that, we are not separate. We are not separate from the waters or the trees, or we're connected. And we see our animal community as kin, as our sacred relatives.
Mm-hmm.
These are the ways that, just seeing ourselves in the world as whole beings. There's so much to it, but I feel like this time of forgetting, where I talk about the domination code and the work that I do with my dad, but I feel like the time of forgetting has really suppressed that, or it's taken people away, and it's created that illusion of separation. And what we're experiencing is a return to the wholeness, and experiencing ourselves as these intuitive beings, as these whole beings, as these magnificent beings.
Mm-hmm.
All of the magic and the miracles, that's what I really feel is so powerful and profound in these times. And like I just mentioned as well, I'm not the only person that is receiving these types of messages, or people are having these incredible dreams. We're in this powerful time of awakening, and it's a great celebration. So it is a time where people are really seeing the shadows, and people have a hard time sometimes to say, is there hope for the future? They always ask me that question. And I say, yes, absolutely. It's just that we're finding our way, and we're learning to find our way in the darkness right now. But the way that we can do that is by really coming into the spirit connection as our foundation. I do see a difference between spirituality and religion, and oftentimes that can be very stifling for people when they feel like it has to fit into some kind of rigid box. And having that spiritual connection is a unique to each and every person, individual, for his or herself. So I feel like that's important as well, to distinguish that. And that's part of this great awakening right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad that
your question.
you definitely did. And I was going to say, I think of I love the way that you answered that about the sacred feminine, because I think for me as well, I think for some people, there is an association when you say sacred feminine specifically with, it can be for some people specifically with a particular deity, for example, like a goddess, or which is totally fine. And I think it's really beautiful. It has been for me that the sacred feminine has been kind of the portal, especially for my background, which, is solidly European Christian for as far back as you can get. So it was really the opening to understanding the sacredness of all life, which then, and so it's less about affiliating with like one particular face of goddess, which if that's how you connect with the divine feminine, I think that's okay too. But that she, at least for me, can also be this portal to this much bigger, more beautiful understanding.
Yes, absolutely. I do see, I celebrate goddess, the actual deity goddesses, but I just see like, wow, it's just like flowers in a garden.
Yes.
Like, look at all of the beautiful, here's the representation of this one and this one. And it's just so exciting and beautiful. So I feel like that's the other opening and blossoming for us. Like I said, it's a unique path, and not everybody may agree, but I just see that we're in a time of liberation to see what feels and calls to us, to our soul, to our heart. That's what is meaningful for me. That's the way that I
Yes.
teach in my classes.
I love that. Well, and I just feel like I can feel your sort of just positive energy around this, which it feels really good. I think sometimes when I think about the times we're in, this is what I tell myself as a mother, who's trying to figure out how to navigate with my kids, with very, I was lucky I had loving parents, but not a lot to draw on in terms of spiritual guidance. And so I kind of told myself, like, okay, this is just the time of the mess. Like, it's just going to be messy because we are sort of fumbling around trying to figure out what works. We know what we were doing before, it doesn't work. I'm not exactly sure what I need to be giving my kids, but I'm going to try my best. I'm going to start with me first, and that hopefully in the fumbling, that they'll see that it's okay to fumble themselves, and that, perhaps for them and any future descendants, they'll have something to hold on to, and there'll be a clearer path. So yeah, I think of it as a messy time, but I say that as just a way of giving myself permission to be really sloppy. Spiritually sloppy. That sounds awful, but I hope that makes sense.
Well, I feel like it is about just being authentic, right? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's about being perfectly imperfect and allowing ourselves a softening. I think that's the other thing, is there's been this rigidity, like like it has to be this way. And I think very much there's this liberation, and it's time, and it is beautiful to have children see that, like, we can make mistakes, and that's how we learn, and that's how we grow. And so, I think in the past generations, I've seen that too, like, oh, they were taught, like, don't make a mistake. That just seems so strange. Like, how can you how can you learn? Like, you course correct, like you learn something. And in my community, I had these incredible elders that talked about, being grateful for the hard times, being grateful for the bad things that happened to them, which sounds absurd to some people, but I just love that as a way of guiding. And, I teach it in my class too. It's just what the elders have given to me as gifts, to really see that it shaped, this elder Al Smith in my community, he lived to be almost 100 years old. Many of the elders in my community did. And, how he was grateful for alcoholism, and he was grateful for tuberculosis, and he was grateful for having been sent to the boarding schools, even though it was, like abuse and torture. So it wasn't a good experience that he was grateful for. He was grateful for the lessons, and how he became stronger, and how he persevered, and all of the, the inner strength of character and spirit, really, and heart that it brought for him. And they always had such an incredible sense of humor. That's what I love about the Indigenous elders. They've had very hard lives in many ways, surviving through many things, but they always kept this incredible sense of humor. So maybe that's part of the positivity that I have.
Yeah, I love that too. Well, and I feel like we're kind of speaking around it. So maybe now's a good time. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about this, language that we used in your bio, which is domination code, like what you mean by that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess because it also is important that I like to share what I speak about in all of the work that I do, but I also do a lot of work with my dad, and I feel very honored, and a sense of, like, I feel a lot of humbleness as well. Like, wow, I'm so grateful to be on this path. But my dad has been speaking about, the domination code, and really the doctrine of discovery, and all of these issues that we see now, like with colonization, things are coming up into the news about slavery and genocide. And, there's a lot around racism, and really looking at the oppression and suppression of various groups of people, of women, certainly, of the divine feminine, certainly, spiritually, as far as being able to even be a Native person in the United States, we were not allowed to have our ceremonies or speak our languages, and it was illegal. And many of these children were forcibly removed from our communities. So it's been my great great grandfather and my great great grandfather. It's hard to know how many greats
Mhm.
But they were sent to Haskell boarding school. And as I said, a lot has come up even recently with, the abuse and really the torture of so many of the children that were sent to those schools. And they were forbidden from speaking their languages, or beaten, or, molested or raped, and these kinds of horrific things. But really, it was part of this campaign that started, which was called actually Kill the Indian, Save the Man. So it's very much about assimilation. So my dad and I speak about these things, but my dad, he's a legal scholar, and he very much talks about the papal bulls that were issued by the Vatican in the 14th and 15th century, and all of the legacy and trauma of how that carried out in the world. But I also like to connect the dots in joining him in the work to say, it's not something that's just ancient history that happened centuries ago. All of the things that we're seeing right now stem from that, and it's put directly into the laws within the Supreme Court and have never been questioned to this day. Like, they still remain. So there's been a lot of work that my dad has been doing for the past 40 years. Speaking about this domination code, though, I took it in my own research to say, well, how far back did this domination code really go back? It actually is before those papal bulls.
Yeah.
That pattern was there, and that legacy of genocide and domination, dehumanization, suppression, and oppression, certainly of women, certainly, the witch trials of Europe, and all of that was happening then, is so much a part of the legacy of how women we're still feeling the suppression and oppression within ourselves. It's wonderful to see things like the Me Too movement, where women are feeling more empowered and being heard finally. That's important. We still have so much work to do, and I really feel that it is a time of this. I feel like women are coming into our sense of power, and men are coming into their hearts. So I think that is another part of this, like I mentioned about the sacred feminine, sacred masculine, and the union that is possible with us really coming into a sense of this wholeness for ourselves. And I feel like, the sacred feminine, sacred masculine is within all people. It doesn't necessarily have a gender focus. But there are certain things within the gender focus that has been perpetuated in certain ways, that has been a part of this legacy, that I feel like it's another part of our awakening. So I feel like this time that we're in is really about illuminating the shadows, so that we can have this compassionate witnessing for each other and to heal. But one thing that I say is, it's not about saying you bad Christians or you bad Catholics or any kind of thing like that. I feel like the more that we can get to the root of the issue, getting down to the deeper layers of how this domination code operates, and really seeing it for what it is, and that it has these tendrils, that it is responsible for racism, it is responsible for genocide or slavery, all of these things. I don't say like, oh, it's that bad patriarchy. I say, no, it's that domination code that then affects the patriarchy. And men are certainly having, trauma from that as well as women.
Oh, yeah.
So there's so many layers to this, but I feel like the more that we can find common ground in these times, that's where we really have this opening to really move forward in a beautiful way. And I feel like that other focus to move forward is the work that I do with the Reverence Code. And that is about finding the spirit-led life and our connection with divine feminine or spirit or source in our own unique way. And that is also about listening to our dreams and connecting with nature and having this sense of interconnection with all beings and all peoples, and just celebrating the diversity of this, the beauty that we have on this planet, with so many beautiful cultures and languages and traditions and spiritual faiths. It's all beautiful, it's all powerful, and I feel like there's so many solutions and innovative ways that we can heal in this moment. But it's really about coming to a place of common ground. I think is really our first step. Because if everyone is just like, no, it's you, no, it's you, no, it's the patriarchy, no, it's women, no, it's men, no, it's it's Democrats, no, it's Republicans, these kinds of things, I feel like this is where we're in the mix of things, and people are not able to come together. There's, this is the important part, is finding that place of coming together. So that's what I do in my work with the Reverence Code, including, doing film showings, showing my dad's film and speaking to people, because I feel like there is a healing moment here possible. when we see the deeper layers and how we can come together.
Yes. And I'll put this in the show notes too, but your dad's film is called Unmasking the Domination Code.
It's called The Doctrine of Discovery.
Doctrine of Discovery. Thank you. Okay.
The Domination Code.
Doctrine of Discovery, Unmasking the Domination Code. And I'll make sure that I put a link to that in the show notes too. Well, and I think, there's so much to unpack there that you said, but one thing that, and I want to hear your reflection on this, but one thing that was really pivotal for me in my own journey with understanding the sacred feminine was, like in my career, I had worked really hard to get into the business world and felt that I needed to be successful in that space, that was kind of how I would be a good feminist. I was highly educated, and I would go out and get the economic opportunities that were not available to my mom, or definitely not available to my grandmother, just didn't have those choices. And I didn't really see that I was still operating within the same framework. Like I was trying to go and grab at my piece, and that's how I was going to get equality or whatever. I would be a strong and powerful woman. And I think that's one of the things that I find myself getting, I'll say frustrated about, wanting to communicate this effectively to women. And I think if you're listening to the show, you're probably already on board. But I think that we can look around, at least in the United States, and see women grabbing political power and economic power in ways that they haven't had before, but without the context that you are speaking to, which you call the domination code, but it's that context. You're still in the same paradigm, and it's missing, I think, the spiritual piece too. And so I'm curious for you, do you feel like your students come to you already with kind of that sense, and now they're looking to fill it in? Or is that something that you find that you have to speak to, like to illuminate for them so that they can see, hey, we're still kind of playing in this same dirty water? Does that make sense, that question?
No, I think I appreciate that question, because there's a lot to unpack in that question. I'll try to remember all the threads, but I feel like definitely I see kind of women emulating the male dominating power.
Yes.
But it is within the domination code model. And I do, unpack that more in my course. I feel like it's this journey that we're going into the domination code, and we're really diving deep into the shadow. And then we not only are looking out in the collective, but we're looking inwards deeply into our self-reflection, into ourselves. I feel like very much so women have been wanting to find the sense of their own power, but doing it in this other way. And oftentimes too, it's that competition. And the other thing that I've seen is, it's so important in, my women's work that I do with women in circles or sessions, how important it is that we are able to heal the sister wounds and heal the ways in which that it's this condemnation of self or condemnation of other. And I see it, this competition of women against women,
Yes.
Sister against sister, and jealousy, insecurity, all of these different pieces that are intertwined into it. But very much so, yes, people do come to my course having a sense of kind of knowing why they're coming to the course. I want, of course, more people to understand. I don't think a lot of people usually will see my dad's film. We'll have a film screening, and so there'll be audiences that come through that way, or we are doing different talks in the world. So they have a sense already. Usually the film is 1 hour long, but it has been also opening hearts and minds since 2015. And it's so profound. It's so moving for not only the heart and the mind, but it really opens up this gateway for people to say, oh my gosh, this movie changed my life, and I didn't know anything about this history. I had no idea. I'm this highly educated person with all of these degrees. And this opened up something in me that they say they understood something, but suddenly a light went on and they could connect the dots to why they feel the way they do, or why these things are not working in their life. But it also, they would literally come to my shoulder and start pulling on my sleeve saying, I don't know what to do. What do I do? This changed my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, we can't just leave them like this. That's why I created the course, is that I felt like people really needed something to find their way in these times. So it takes them through this domination code understanding in all of the ways, all of the levels in which it's operating, and the subtle levels that it's operating. And then it takes them into this other pathway of really understanding the reverence code and connecting back to the time that was before and what that really looks like, how it can be something that we feel can illuminate the future that we're looking for. I think so many people want to see that there is a brighter future, but they just don't even have a sense of what that could be at this time for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and I mean, if you're, there's a lot of bleak stuff out there, in the news and what's happening with our climate. And yeah, and I mean, you've already spoken to the divisions between people. So I think it is easy to get wrapped up into the realities, the really ugly realities of what we're facing as a species. So yeah, I get that. I want us to take a quick pause here. I actually haven't done this before, but my friends over at the Missing Witches podcast, they've been on the show before. You should absolutely listen to their show if you haven't, because it's amazing. But anyways, they're doing a fundraiser. So we're going to take a quick break. They're going to tell you about it and we'll be right back. All right. And we are back. So let's talk, Shona, some more about the reverence code. I love this language. How did you land on this? And can you, I know you've been talking to it a little bit, but can you expand upon that a little bit?
Well, interestingly, I had been doing so much of my spiritual practice, really, finally opening, blossoming. In many ways, when we do open and blossom, sometimes the floodgates are opening. It's a little too much at once, but I definitely moved into practices and was really feeling a sense of, I had these moments. I think we all have these moments. Usually they're fleeting moments where I just felt so connected, so held, so much love. I just would cry because my heart was opening. So I was just like, I love life. I love this world. I love people. I love animals. I love trees. And so I would just be so immersed in it. And I would talk to my dad about it. And, I would say, or remember a very clear conversation actually, where I said, I feel like you talk about the domination code, but I feel like there's this other feeling that I feel when I'm just so connected in that space, which I would say, feeling her, feeling she, feeling goddess around us, spirit holding us. Some people say creator holding us, but I just felt so loved and loving, like I just loved everything. But I said, it's not respect. I feel like that's not just, doesn't even go there. It's not enough. And it's not even awe and it's not wonder, but it's all together. And I said, the only word I can think of is reverence. I have this reverence for life. And I know that some people have misunderstood what reverence is, because I think they're looking at it in the religious sense, which again is holding that power over in that domination code understanding of things. But this is the opening. This is the vessel. This is the so my dad and I speak to that, like, the domination is usually over the suppression, oppression of things, but when you turn it upside down, it becomes the vessel and it's the sacred feminine. So I feel like it just was this complete surrender into that. And there's no words. I can't, even describe how beautiful, how wonderful it is. So I just said, that's what it feels like. I have so much reverence. And I said, you have to talk the domination code. I feel like there's something else that's the reverence code. And I wanted to be able to share that with people. And I think that's been very, very life-changing for many people when I help them learn about it in the course that I do and different talks and with my work in the world today.
I love that. I love that language. And I also love it feels like a reclamation. I have the same reaction to the word devotion. I think in a religious context, that feels like allegiance to dogma. And, but in another context, it is, it's like being in service to all of life. Like it can actually be a really beautiful thing. So I love the way that you're using that word. I've heard you reference this a couple of times now. And so I wonder if you could speak to this too, this idea of the time that was before.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, actually, I received a message about it I could share a little bit about that, but I feel like, it's really speaking to this beauty in this time of harmony and balance. And I look at it, the time before colonization in indigenous peoples throughout Turtle Island is what we call it. Being able to just be free, our free and independent existence since time immemorial, and speaking our languages and having things intact and having our ceremonies and our connection with, like we're describing, our connection with creator and source and all living things, and that just being the way of life. So I very much feel, like I said, there was this systematic approach over, centuries, where there was this introduction of what I see as the domination code in my own research, taking my dad's research, but then going farther back and really, really exploring deeper into what they would consider prehistory, pre-civilization. And that's the magical time that I see is so important for us to really have an understanding of. Oftentimes, people in schools, people are taught like, oh, there's nothing before civilization.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so I feel like that's something we need a new origin story, is what I've been saying for a long time, to really look at the magic and the beauty and the balance and the harmony, and that the deep magical secrets that we are looking for right now are held in that time that was before.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, because I don't want to say, I want you to keep going, but I feel like when we say civilization, right, which the word civil means we are, I don't have my dictionary in front of me, but I mean, you're interacting peacefully and kindly with each other. I almost feel like what we were talking about when we say civilization, the beginning of civilization, we're actually talking about the beginning of your dominance, like
exactly.
as a paradigm. It's Absolutely. Not, there's nothing civil about it.
That's what's amazing. So looking at the history and looking at my dad's, scholarly research of 40 years, that's what he began to see. And that's what it's like opening Da Vinci's Code or something like that, where he was able to see within these legal documents, within the papal bulls, these, that were issued from the Vatican in the 14th, 15th century. That's when it started to really become this systematic approach. And, it's become the operating way of the planet, unfortunately. So I feel like that's something that we are experiencing, we're coming to terms with, but we don't really have a sense of what we can understand how it operates. But looking at, my dad will even look at etymology, and like you said, you don't have a dictionary in front of you, but he says, civilization, it actually means domination. So it is very much starting that course where, yes, it started things in that patterning in a very systematic way. So that's what's interesting to really also see the contrast from the time that was before, and how things were held in balance and harmony, and that connection of living with nature rather than domination over nature, that has led to then the climate crisis that we're seeing, these types of just the attitudes of, being superior, inferior, superior of, species over others, or superior men over women, superior one woman over another, these kind of men over men, like all of it is based on domination, dehumanization. So these are patterns that are coming to our awareness. I say the shadows are coming to the light in order to be healed. The skeletons are out of the closet. Things are out from under the rug. It's very important that we are able to open our hearts and our minds in this time to really look at the shadows, because that's part of our healing too. It's part of our awakening, so that we can move through and say, this looks ugly. We're not happy with this. We need to find solutions, but it's also about coming together, not about fighting the separateness and staying in this pattern that's perpetuating for so long. So it is the healing moment. It is the evolutionary leap, butterfly to caterpillar to butterfly moment. So yeah, I feel like we're really, really expanding ourselves, but that's the beauty of it as well. I feel like we have so much that we can offer each other if we are opening our hearts, and that's really part of this time too, is the practice of that.
Yeah. And I think that, what you're saying too, I'd love to hear you talk about this a little bit, is it feels like it's important to understand that if you're talking about the time that was before, like we are where we are, right? We're not going backwards. We cannot repeat the past or become who we were 20,000 years ago or whatever. It's just not possible. And I'm not even sure that, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm not even sure that I know for certain, the circumstances were so different, it would be impossible. But I'm curious, like for you, how you see that understanding of the time that was before, like, so we're not going backwards, but how does that inform us? Or like, how does that relate to what you've also talked about, which is this idea of the great shift, like where we're headed? Like, how do those things kind of work together in your perspective?
Yes. Well, a lot of it is also what's specifically in my spiritual messages that have come through. So I feel like there's a lot of guidance in signposts to navigate the times. But I feel like, there's even that spirit-led life, the practices, this understanding that we're not separate, this understanding that there's a way of upholding life and life systems by honoring the reverence code, by honoring our connection with source, our connection with something that is spiritual, seeing the spiritual, the spirit within all things. I think that is very much foundational to honoring that time that was before, because I feel like people have come away from that and we've lost that sense of it. If people are living in a domination, dominate or be dominated is kind of the mantra. Unfortunately, then what does that lead to? So there's principles, there's very much, we have the original instructions that our original peoples talk about. And they were given to us for a reason. They're very simple. Another thing came to me also that I talk about with the reverence code practices. I was at Mount Shasta, and I just remember having this very, very vivid dream. It was a table of contents, actually. So I've been saying for a long time, I'm going to be writing my book on the reverence code, but that it was a list of these practices that are very simple, but they can help us in these times or in times when we're in crisis to come back into that sense of center, that sense of balance within ourselves, but also to be in harmony with others and the natural world. I feel like that's another part of it. So it isn't necessarily about like going backwards. I feel like we're going forwards, but there's a lot more to the world than what is just tangible, physical, only on, like, that's so limiting. But like people will say that I've opened the door, they're seeing, like people call it 5D reality or whatever. Like we're in a different reality. We're operating on a whole level. There's a whole perspective that's not even on most people's radar. But sometimes we get these fleeting moments of it where we feel that awe, that wonder, that reverence within ourselves. And it can be all of the time. That's what people don't realize, how incredible life can be when we're tapped into it. I feel like we're plugging ourselves in, not to our cell phones, to social media, but we're plugging into source, we're plugging into her, we're plugging into mother, divine mother. And that allows us to be like, spread our wings. That gives us fuel to be empowered, to live our passion, be on purpose. That's where true magic for our future and the innovation of what's needed right now for healing can really blossom.
Do you think, I'm trying to think about, okay, so I want that. I want to feel plugged in all the time. I really do. And I do have those moments. I do have them frequently, but I do also find that it's challenging sometimes because we're still part of this paradigm, right? Like we have to be here. And most people I know have to participate in a capitalist system, for example, to pay for the food. And it's a harsh reality. I think, for a lot of people who have lost all sense of community connection, and there are very little safe social safety nets for people, right? Like it isn't there. You fall. It's a harsh way of being. So I wonder, do you think it's possible right now to be, if you're kind of in that, we're still having to participate in this paradigm, if it's possible to feel that plugged in all the time? I want it to be yes. Can you?
I say yes. Well, because it's like we talked about in the beginning, right? We said having being in balance, that we can be in the world and I could be vacuuming and I could have,
Yes.
I can have Divine Mother just like,
yes. Thank you for bringing it back. Yes.
and I'm like, what is happening to me? But it's happening to a lot of people. And
Yes.
and I find, like I call it my spirit tweets. So I could be just driving along and I'm getting spirit tweets or messages or symbols or signs or Source and Gaia is always speaking to me all of the time because I'm choosing to be, I'm saying yes. And I think that's a big part of it is I'm saying, yes, I'm ready. I want to be plugged in. I'm excited to be plugged in. And how can I be an instrument to bring healing and possibilities and magic and miracles to other people's lives? How can I, be here? I know that we all came here at this time to do our magic and do our good. And I definitely take that seriously. I've dedicated my life to that. So I say, and people in my course, they say it's life-changing. They've said like, I can't believe, well, some people come in and they feel like they haven't maybe for years or decades, or they've never really remembered their dreams. But that's something that I work on very much in my course, is helping to guide people to tune into their intuition, to tune into their dreams. That's very much a part of our, Indigenous teachings, is being connected and having a sense of our dreams, because it's guidance. The ancestors, there's so much information there. There's so much that can come through as far as messages or support in many ways. And I just feel it's so beautiful to hear, people connecting in that way, or they're so excited that they're plugged in all of the things that are happening, or synchronicities or manifestations. And again, like this giddiness, this feeling alive that comes with that. So yes, it's not like it's not that my life has not been without traumas. It's certainly, I've had some very, very hard times in my life. My life is not perfect even now, but I definitely have a resilience because I have a foundation that is my core, that keeps me strong. But it takes practice as well. So, and I think that the part of that is saying yes and learning to be plugged in on a regular basis.
Oh, I love that. I love that answer. Tell us about your courses, because you've referenced them a couple times now. So can you talk to us about what you're focused on in your teaching?
Well, I mentioned about my Reverence Code Changemakers course, and that's been so beautiful. I've had that since I think 2016. A lot of small groups, many people that they'll see my dad's film. Again, the Doctrine of Discovery, Unmasking the Domination Code. And that really helps to open their eyes to say, wow, I want to do something. Or some people, they may be connected into social justice, or they're concerned about climate crisis. There's a lot of things, but definitely people that are in leadership. I've been excited that it's just been all various types of people, all backgrounds, all ages in many ways as well. And that's, feel like it's a beautiful 10-week course that allows people to really take that deep dive into the domination code and really seeing all of the ways that it manifests. I say that it's something that's affecting our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirit, our sense of purpose, our relationships, and our prosperity or abundance in the world, and as well as our impact, not only like in our families and our communities and the world as a whole. So all of these ways, but also the other side is that, the reverence code can also be this way of moving forward in the spirit-led life and having these practices and opening ourselves, blossoming into our highest potential, our highest possibilities, that having that plugged in feeling, that's been really magical for people to see both sides and walk the path. And also seeing what's possible in the world when they take inspired action in those ways. And then my Sacred Feminine Rising course, I just feel is so powerful right now for women to really have this sense, as you mentioned, coming into a sense of ourselves in a different kind of a power, a different kind of understanding of authenticity within ourselves. I thought I would read something actually. It's just on my website. Can I share that with you?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so I feel like this is just a message. I wrote it a long time ago, like 2016 or something. She is the one inside you, alive with wisdom and authentic power. She is the embodiment of creative genius and artistic self-expression. She is overflowing with vitality, radiance, joy, and abundance. She is bold, beautiful, and sexy, unapologetic in her sensuality, living from her greatness and speaking her truth. She is independent and free, but also deeply connected to her friends, loved ones, and community. She has tapped into the spark of the universe, trusting her intuition, sharing her spiritual gifts. She is full of passion, living her purpose, and takes pleasure in living life fully. She has courage, strength, and resilience to rise above obstacles and challenges. She is brave enough to scale high mountains or explore the dark depths of her soul. She knows, loves, and accepts herself on all levels and has the ability to light up a room. She is a change maker, a visionary, a luminary leader, inspired, giving, and in service to others. She is crystal clear on what she wants and goes for it without fear of mistakes. She is calm in the storm of daily dramas and filled with peace, love, and bliss. She understands her unlimited capacity to create the life of her wildest dreams. She is the Shiro within, the inner goddess. She is incredibly powerful and has the unique ability to attract life's magic and miracles. She is unstoppable, saying yes to life, and life supports her with her big vision. Isn't she beautiful, powerful, and amazing? She is you.
Mm.
So I wrote that just as a opening to say, this is what I vision for you in the course. And not just for each woman individually, but the synergy and the power of sisterhood. And as I mentioned, really holding ourselves in this like a reverence for each other as sisters, and seeing each other, seeing the beauty and the unique, authentic person being that each sister is. Because I feel like, there's, again, like I was talking about, that competition, the sister competition can be so hurtful, so harming. The insecurities and the jealousies that women feel, or this kind of like pitting one against the other, that can happen. And I feel like there's this healing within that that's so needed. And this beauty, I've done a lot of facilitating of women's circles. And, I just love, in the beginning when I started doing that, women would say, can we have this every week, or can we have this every new moon and every full moon? and they'd never experienced something so connected. So, but I feel like that's the natural way of things. In the time that was before, we had that, we needed that, and we felt supported and held in a different way. So I think that's really another part of, a lot of women are coming into that. There's more women's circles happening, but I think there's some magic in that that's needed now.
Oh, I love that. Well, yes, she is you. And this feels like a good place, like to round us out. She is you. And she's me too. She's all of us. So there we go.
That's right.
I love it. Shona, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to make sure to put all of your information in the show notes, but do you want to tell us quickly how people can find you online if they want to learn more about you and your work and your offerings?
Yes, you can visit my website at Shawna Bluestar, SHAWNA Bluestar.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Shawna Bluestar. And I'll be starting my Sacred Feminine Rising Healing Immersion course. Is going to be starting at the end of May. We'll have an orientation. So I'm really excited for that, and would love for you to join us. And we have our ongoing film showings that we do, and a lot of speaking events. And of course, our Mother Earth delegation is very magical. I feel so much love. I feel like they're my soul family in so many ways. I have love and respect for them. So a lot of the beautiful elders and very authentic prayers for you to also have more guidance in these times.
Yes, and I will be sure to put all of that on the show notes. It's been an honor and a privilege to be in conversation with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Liz.
Yeah. And thank you, all of you, as always, for listening. You know what? I would have these conversations even if you weren't listening, but it's so much more fun when I know that people are tuning in. So thank you for being here. And as always, if you like the show, you can subscribe to it. You can leave it a favorable review. You can tell your friends about it. You can do all those things. And until next time, take really good care of yourself, and I will talk to you again soon.